Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Judges chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 9. After Joshua died, the Israelites asked the Lord who should lead the invasion against the Canaanites and launch the attack. The Lord said the men of Judah should take the lead. Be sure of this, I am handing the land over to them. The men of Judah said to their relatives, the men of Simeon, invade our allotted land with us and help us attack the Canaanites. Then we will go with you into your allotted land. So the men of Simeon went with them. The men of Judah attacked, and the Lord handed the Canaanites and Perizzites over to them. They killed 10,000 men at Bezek. They met Adonai-Bezek at Bezek and fought him. They defeated the Canaanites and Perizzites. When Adonai-Bezek ran away, they chased him and captured him. Then they cut off his thumb and big toes. Adonai-Bezek said, 70 kings with thumbs and big toes cut off used to lick up food scraps under my table. God has repaid me for what I did to them. They brought him to Jerusalem, where he died. The men of Judah attacked Jerusalem and captured it. They put the sword to it and set the city on fire. Later, the men of Judah went down to attack the Canaanites living in the hill country, the Negev, and the lowlands. The men of Judah attacked the Canaanites living in Hebron. Hebron used to be called Kiriath Arba. They killed Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai. From there, they attacked the people of Deber. Deber used to be called Kiriath Sepher. Caleb said, to the man who attacks and captures Kiriath Sepher, I will give my daughter Aksa as a wife. When Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, captured it, Caleb gave him his daughter Aksa as a wife. One time, Aksa came and charmed her father so she could ask him for some land. When she got down from her donkey, Caleb said to her, What would you like? She answered, Please give me a special present. Since you have given me land in the Negev, now give me springs of water. So Caleb gave her both the upper and lower springs. Now the descendants of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up with the people of Judah from the city of date palm trees to Arad in the desert of Judah, located in the Negev. They went and lived with the people of Judah. The men of Judah went with their brothers, the men of Simeon, and defeated the Canaanites living in Zephath. They wiped out Zephath, so people now call the city Hormah. The men of Judah captured Gaza, Ashkelon, Ekron, and the territory surrounding each of these cities. The Lord was with the men of Judah. They conquered the hill country, but they could not conquer the people living in the coastal plain, because they had chariots with iron-rimmed wheels. Caleb received Hebron, just as Moses had promised. He drove out the 3 Anakites. The men of Benjamin, however, did not conquer the Jebusites living in Jerusalem. The Jebusites live with the people of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this very day. When the men of Joseph attacked Bethel, the Lord was with them. When the men of Joseph spied out Bethel, it used to be called Luz, the spies spotted a man leaving the city. They said to him, If you show us a secret entrance into the city, we will reward you. He showed them a secret entrance into the city, and they put the city to the sword, but they let the man and his extended family leave safely. He moved to Hittite country and built a city. He named it Luz and has kept that name to this very day. The men of Manasseh did not conquer Bethshan, Tanakh, or their surrounding towns, nor did they conquer the people living in Dor, Ibleam, Megiddo, or their surrounding towns. The Canaanites managed to remain in those areas. Whenever Israel was strong militarily, they forced the Canaanites to do hard labor, but they never totally conquered them. The men of Ephraim did not conquer the Canaanites living in Gezer. The Canaanites lived among them in Gezer. The men of Zebulun did not conquer the people living in Kitron or Nahalol. The Canaanites lived among them and were forced to do hard labor. The men of Asher did not conquer the people living in Akko or Sidon, nor did they conquer Ahlab, Akzib, Helba, Aphek, or Rehob. The people of Asher lived among the Canaanites, residing in the land because they did not conquer them. The men of Naphtali did not conquer the people living in Beth Shemesh or Beth Anath. They live among the Canaanites residing in the land. The Canaanites living in Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath were forced to do hard labor for them. The Amorites forced the people of Dan to live in the hill country. They did not allow them to live in the coastal plain. The Amorites managed to remain in Har Haris, Aijalon, and Shalbim. Whenever the tribe of Joseph was strong militarily, the Amorites were forced to do hard labor. The border of Amorite territory ran from the Scorpion Ascent to Selah and on up. The Lord's angelic messenger went up from Gilgal to Bochim. He said, I brought you up from Egypt and led you into the land I had solemnly promised to give to your ancestors. I said, I will never break my agreement with you. But you must not make an agreement with the people who live in this land. You should tear down the altars where they worship. But you have disobeyed me. Why would you do such a thing? At that time I also warned you, if you disobey, I will not drive out the Canaanites before you. They will ensnare you, and their gods will lure you away. When the Lord's messenger finished speaking these words to all the Israelites, the people wept loudly. They named that place Bochim, and offered sacrifices to the Lord there. When Joshua dismissed the people, the Israelites went to their allotted portions of territory, intending to take possession of their land. The people worshipped the Lord throughout Joshua's lifetime, and as long as the elderly men who outlived him remained alive, these men had witnessed all the great things the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the Lord's servant, died at the age of 110. The people buried him in his allotted land in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. The entire generation passed away. A new generation grew up that had not personally experienced the Lord's presence or seen what he had done for Israel. I'm confused as to the timeline here, or the how the storytelling. What it's doing with the storytelling here. Given in Judges 1:1, it mentions after Joshua died, the Israelites asked the Lord such and such, but in Judges 2:6. Well, in Judges 2:8, Joshua, son of Nun, the Lord's servant, died at the age of 110. So, looks like, well, from what I've heard before, it's not so much chronological, but goes from one important point to another. So, yeah. Reading through Guzik a little bit, you had Moses as a strong leader, and then you had Joshua as a strong leader, but subsequent to Joshua, there were no single leaders for Israel to look up to. It was up for the individual tribes, I guess, to lead themselves. Yeah, during this period of the Judges, from Guzik, lasting some 340 years, there was no standing office of national leadership. Israel had no king, no president, and no prime minister on earth, only God in heaven. Yet at the necessary and appropriate times, God brought forth a leader for the nation. For the most part, these leaders would rise up, do his or her job, and then return to their obscurity. This required that the people of Israel maintain a real, abiding trust in God. Yeah, when this book uses the term judge, it doesn't mean someone who sits in a court and decides legal issues. The Hebrew word shafat has more the idea of a heroic leader. The Hebrew word shofatim is derived from a word meaning to put right, and so to rule, and this is exactly what these men did. The people of Israel had great obstacles. They were surrounded by people who lived in the most terrible immorality and idolatry, making a constant temptation to the same sins. The idolatrous lives of the Canaanites who lived around Israel were focused on mainly three things: money, sex, and having a relationship with God on my terms instead of God's terms. The book of Judges shows us a time that is sometimes confusing, difficult, and dark. For this reason, many neglect the Judges and regard this period of time as a dark ages of Israel's history. Yet if we neglect this book, we neglect a wonderful account of the love and graciousness of God and how he lovingly corrects his people. What we find out about man in Judges is depressing. But what we find out about God in Judges is wonderful. On the human side, it is a story of disobedience and disaster, and on the divine side, of continued direction and deliverance. There is, however, one light in which the whole book may be viewed which renders it invaluable. It is a most remarkable history of the long suffering of God toward the Israelites, in which we find the most signal instances of his justice and mercy alternately displayed. The people sinned and were punished. They repented and found mercy. Something of this kind we meet with in every page, and these things are written for our warning. None should presume, for God is just. None need despair, for God is merciful. Yeah. So Judah acted wisely by partnering up with Simeon to attack. Judah also conquered Hebron, and the city was given to faithful Caleb and his family. Hebron was the ancient city of Abraham and the city which discouraged the 10 unfaithful spies from taking the promised land in Moses' days because of the Anakim which lived there. Yeah, so as a reminder, those spies went up to spy out the land, and they encountered Hebron and became dismayed. That is, we're never going to be able to capture this land. Caleb, however, had faith, along with Joshua, and as such, God promised him the land that he walked on, and so he eventually did get Hebron. Good bit on Oxa there. As impressive as Judah's victory was, it was nevertheless incomplete. They could not defeat nations that had the latest military technology, chariots of iron. This spoke more to Judah's lack of full trust in God than it did to Canaanite military superiority. Chariots were no problem for God's people when they were trusting God. And their attitudes should have been like that, reflected in Psalm 20, verse 7. That is, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God. Yeah. So, the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountains. Here we see the people of God being pushed around by their enemies. This should never be the case when God's people are walking in the strength of their God. And when the strength of the house of Joseph became greater, they were put under tribute. Again, instead of doing what God said should be done with these enemies to completely drive them out, they decided to use them as they thought best, to put these enemies under tribute. Yeah. This they did out of covetousness, the root of all evil, neglecting the command of God to the contrary. The end result was that the Amorites had an appointed boundary within the inheritance of God's people. This was an unnecessary and dangerous accommodation to the social and spiritual enemies of the people of God. There is a dangerous and seductive form of pacifism in the Christian life, which ignores the reality of the spiritual battle so clearly described in Ephesians 6:10-20, and referred to by analogy in the book of Judges. This pacifist attitude will happily make a peace with the devil that basically says, I will not harm your interests if you leave me mostly alone. This attitude of spiritual surrender is unacceptable for the Christian. Leon Trotsky, the infamous communist leader, said at least one correct thing. You may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. To take an attitude of spiritual surrender is to willingly lose that war. At this period of time, the tribes of Israel at their best experienced incomplete victory. At their worst, they simply surrendered to and accommodated the enemy. This makes us value the complete and glorious victory of Jesus Christ on our behalf all the more. There was nothing left incomplete in the victory he won for us on the cross and through the resurrection. Anyhow, carrying on. Luke chapter 21, verse 29 through chapter 22, verse 13. Then he told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the other trees. When they sprout leaves, you see for yourselves and know that summer is now near. So also you, when you see these things happening, know that the kingdom of God is near. I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But be on your guard, so that your hearts are not weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day close down upon you suddenly like a trap. For it will overtake all who live on the face of the whole earth. But stay alert at all times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things that must happen and to stand before the Son of Man. So every day Jesus was teaching in the temple courts, but at night he went and stayed on the Mount of Olives. And all the people came to him early in the morning to listen to him in the temple courts. Now, the feast of unleavened bread, which is called the Passover, was approaching. The chief priests and the experts in the law were trying to find some way to execute Jesus, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered Judas, the one called Iscariot, who was one of the 12. He went away and discussed with the chief priests and officers of the temple guard how he might betray Jesus, handing him over to them. They were delighted and arranged to give him money. So Judas agreed and began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus when no crowd was present. Then the day for the feast of unleavened bread came, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare the Passover for us to eat." They said to him, "Where do you want us to prepare it?" He said to them, "Listen, when you have entered the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him into the house that he enters, and tell the owner of the house, 'The teacher says to you, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' Then he will show you a large furnished room upstairs. Make preparations there." So they went and found things just as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover. So Judas, despite hearing the words of God directly from the lips of God on a daily basis, still decided to betray Jesus, which, given that, it should be unsurprising to us that there are some who, on hearing the words of God conveyed from the lips of his servants, reject God as well. So, anyhow, carrying on. Psalm chapter 90, verse 1 through 91, verse 16. O Lord, you have been our protector through all generations, even before the mountains came into existence, or you brought the world into being. You were eternal, God. You make mankind return to the dust and say, "Return, O people." Yes, in your eyes 1,000 years are like yesterday that quickly passes, or like one of the divisions of the nighttime. You bring their lives to an end, and they fall asleep. In the morning they are like the grass that sprouts up. In the morning it glistens and sprouts up. At evening time it withers and dries up. Yes, we are consumed by your anger. We are terrified by your wrath. You are aware of our sins. You even know about our hidden sins. Yes, throughout all our days we experience your raging fury. The years of our lives pass quickly, like a sigh. The days of our lives add up to 70 years, or 80 if one is especially strong. But even one's best years are marred by trouble and oppression. Yes, they pass quickly, and we fly away. Who can really fathom the intensity of your anger? Your raging fury causes people to fear you. So teach us to consider our mortality, so that we might live wisely. Turn back toward us, O Lord. How long must this suffering last? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your loyal love. Then we will shout for joy and be happy all our days. Make us happy in proportion to the days you have afflicted us, and in proportion to the years we have experienced trouble. May your servants see your work. May their sons see your majesty. May our sovereign God extend his favor to us. Make our endeavors successful. Yes, make them successful. As for you, the one who lives in the shelter of the Sovereign One and resides in the protective shadow of the Mighty King, I say this about the Lord, my shelter and my stronghold, my God in whom I trust. He will certainly rescue you from the snare of the hunter and from this destructive plague. He will shelter you with his wings. You will find safety under his wings. His faithfulness is like a shield or protective wall. You need not fear the terrors of the night, the arrow that flies by day, the plague that comes in the darkness, or the disease that comes at noon. Though 1,000 may fall beside you, and a multitude on your right side, it will not reach you. Certainly you will see it with your very own eyes. You will see the wicked paid back, for you have taken refuge in the Lord, my shelter, the Sovereign One. No harm will overtake you. No illness will come near your home, for he will order his angels to protect you in all you do. They will lift you up in their hands, so you will not slip and fall on a stone. You will subdue a lion and a snake. You will trample underfoot a young lion and a serpent. The Lord says, because he is devoted to me, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he is loyal to me. When he calls out to me, I will answer him. I will be with him when he is in trouble. I will rescue him and bring him honor. I will satisfy him with long life and will let him see my salvation. Yeah, and I think in the first psalm there, Psalm 90, that it is important that in 90:12, teach us to consider our mortality so that we might live wisely. That is, we have to realize that eventually we'll one day die, and we need to not live like we're immortal here, but to spend the time that we've been given wisely. And finally, Proverbs chapter 13, verses 24 and 25. The one who spares his rod hates his child, but the one who loves his child is diligent in disciplining him. The righteous has enough food to satisfy his appetite, but the belly of the wicked lacks food. Yeah, it's important to discipline. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.